Cinema, by its very nature, is maximalist.
Flies to the galaxy while secretly supporting.
A novel can be created by one person with the pencil and a paper. A painting can be created with one person, a canvas, and some paint. A song can be sung with just the human body. But a film? Film as an art form is grandiose, partially because of everything that goes into it. You have the framing of the camera, the blocking of the actors, the movement of the camera, the set design, the production design, the screenplay, the actor's performance, the editing, the sound design, the music, the lighting, the color grading, even deciding camera settings like aspect ratio, resolution, film stock, the list goes on. Each and every shot in every movie you see is painstakingly created. Every aspect of the frame has been decided by multiple people, and they have reviewed all the options of every aspect that it could be. Cinema is an art form of collaboration, where dozens and dozens of artists in hyper-specified fields come together to create a work of art. Because of all the moving parts, calling a film minimalist is pretty counterintuitive. But because of that, there is such a beauty in the simplicity and the quiet of cinema. Slow cinema is a film genre, and I think learning and understanding the value of slow cinema will also help appreciate all types of movies and all types of art, not just slow cinema. Also, slow cinema is a specific genre, but I will be including films that don't necessarily count as slow cinema, but are just slow-ish cinema. I'm talking lowercase s slow cinema, not capital S slow cinema. So although a film like Bicycle Thieves is not slow cinema, I still will be using it as a talking point. There are two main ways to express slower cinema. Firstly, there's slow pacing and low concept within the screenplay. This would include films such as Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story, Vittorio De Sica's Bicycle Thieves, and Satyajit Ray's Apu trilogy. These films have very stripped down, almost minimalist plots. Tokyo Story is a very simple story about an elderly couple visiting their children. Bicycle Thieves is about a man trying to find his stolen bicycle. Now, the other type of slow cinema is more closely related to the actual capital S genre of slow cinema. This is characterized by extremely long takes and usually little to no plot. Examples of this would be the works of Andrei Tarkovsky, Edward Yang, and Béla Tarr. Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker has a runtime of 161 minutes and has about 142 shots, making an average shot length of a little over a minute. For context, the average shot length of a Hollywood film has gone down tremendously as the years have gone by, to an average of about 2.5 seconds per shot in 2014. But even in old Hollywood, the average shot length was only about 12 seconds compared to Stalker's 70-ish second average. Tango, the magnum opus of slow cinema director Béla Tarr, is 439 minutes long and has approximately 150 shots, making a shot average of about 3 minutes. These extremely long takes are very intentional by the filmmakers. But let's first look at how the size of cinema elevates slow cinema. Every movie is projected the same way. The only difference is the aspect ratio, or the ratio to the height and width of the frame. But besides that, they're all projected the same way unless there's a unique gimmick. There are plenty of different types of screens to play movies, but the silver screen is universal. Because of that, cinema creates a level playing field for everything that is projected. When watching the film on the silver screen, the Rohirrim charge occupies the same space as Gene Dealman cutting potatoes. Rei Ayanami holding the entire world in their hands takes up the same space as Shukichi and Tomi looking at the water. The scale of these are wildly different, but they take up the same space and thus the same importance. The camera is such a unique storytelling device. It is simultaneously incredibly subjective and objective. It's objective in the sense that it objectively depicts what it is pointing at. When you point a camera at an apple, you see the apple. That's exactly what is there, and it's exactly what you see. But the camera is also subjective in how it biases the frame. When you point the camera at an apple, you force the audience to stare at that apple. You draw all the eyes of the entire theater right to that apple. Without the camera there, no one would notice that apple. It would essentially be meaningless. But pointing the camera at it inherently glorifies that apple. Despite the camera's objective depiction of reality, it will always be subjective because of the way it exalts what it's depicting. Jean Dielman cutting potatoes means nothing unless the camera is there. But since the camera is there, Jean dropping a potato is as momentous in comparison to the rest of the screen as Captain America wielding Mjolnir. Realism in film, just like minimalism, is basically an oxymoron. The inclusion of editing in filmmaking makes true realism pretty much impossible, even with long takes. Although shot reverse shot represents something similar to the way our eyes dart from one person to the other in a conversation, it's not exactly what happens. Editing disjoints the temporality of a film, specifically between scenes. When we cut from somebody saying, "let's go," to an establishing shot of the next scene, we have just broken the laws of physics and traveled through time within an instant. This does not represent realism at all. Even in strong attempts at realism, it never fully works. Italian neorealism was a film movement that attempted to display true realism within the film. It used non-professional actors to get more genuine and grounded performances. They also only shot on location, avoiding fabricated sets and sound stages. Their stories are all realistic without any supernatural or fantasy elements. However, this is still all a facade of reality. Despite the efforts to mirror reality, it's still just a fabrication. Neorealism is still just people pretending, and the subjectivity of the camera is still in play. This isn't a critique at attempts of realism, more of something to keep in mind when understanding neorealist type films. Just because it's depicting real life doesn't mean it's depicting something boring that you've already experienced. One of the values of realism in film is the way that it emphasizes small things in our lives that maybe we experience but don't actively think about or feel. This is why Yasujiro Ozu, Hirokazu Koreeda, and Satyajit Ray are so impactful. They tell stories of people with everyday problems, and what is depicted in their films have been experienced by most people watching them, but the act of filming these realistic experiences brings a new focus to them. We have all experienced the family drama of Tokyo Story or Aparajito, but watching it in an art form and having it be displayed elegantly on film brings special meaning to it and uncovers our deep feelings about those subjects. This is why even though you love your mom, after you watch Aparajito or Still Walking, you think, fuck, I need to call my mom and tell her I love her. One aspect that slow cinema and long takes elevate is the time we spend with the characters. Not just the length of the movie, but the length of the shot will give us a greater feeling of temporal continuity. Although editing within a film is still interpreted as continuous, there is a different feeling when holding a long shot. It doesn't feel like the camera is explicitly showing you everything that is important, but rather it presents the information in real time, how you would experience it if you were right there with the characters. This isn't to say that editing, even hyper-fast editing, is bad, but more to say that there are pros and cons to both depending on what the intent of the story is. In a film such as Jean Dielman, this temporal continuity is integral to the themes of the film. You sit there and watch Jean do mundane tasks in real time because it absorbs you into her slice of life. How long it takes her to cut up vegetables is how long you will watch her do it. If it just showed a brief clip of her cutting the vegetables and then cutting to the vegetables already being cut, our brains would piece together the time jump. But watching it in a long take makes us become enveloped in the event. At the end of both the quick cut and the long take, we understand the same information. She cut her vegetables. But the difference between these two indicates that the end goal of art is not always the point. In the quick edit, the filmmaker would be essentially saying that all that is important in the scene is that the vegetables are cut. In the long take, the filmmaker is signifying that the experience of cutting the vegetables is what is important, not the fact that they are cut. Same surface level information, different impact. The entire film of Jean Dielman is about this woman over the span of 3 days as she lives her mundane life. I'm not going to spoil the ending because the ending is pretty crazy, but the crazy ending is the payoff for spending 4 hours of tedium with her. If the film was much shorter and only showed the beginning and then cut to the end of every chore, it would be a wildly different movie. If it was edited like a montage, then it would give this feeling of drive within the film. A quick cutting montage like that would show that Jean is more productive and is plowing through her chores quickly and productively. But that's not what Jean Dielman is about at all. It wants you to sit in that uncomfortable tedium of her life. You sit and watch this dreary life unfold, and it makes you feel like you're living the same mundane life rather than watching a fun and dopamine-infused montage. The dullness of the film culminates in the ending with a big payoff. Slow cinema directors like Andrei Tarkovsky, Teo Angelopoulos, and Bela Tarr are well known for their exceedingly long shots. But what is the benefit of these besides the temporality? One of the things that these long takes allow is for the audience to fully soak in the frame. There is a concept in filmmaking and editing called affinity of continuum of movement. It's essentially about how the audience keeps track of the movement on screen even while editing occurs. Whenever an edit occurs, the audience has to reorient themselves with the new frame. Their eyes need to locate where to look next and then process the new information presented. In most cases, this is pretty seamless and happens instantaneously. It helps when the setting remains the same, such as cutting to the same few people within a room. Once the geography of the room is established, it's pretty easy to reconfigure yourself to the next shot, even if it happens very quickly. Whenever changing locations or backgrounds, it takes the brain slightly longer to process the new information. This is why when a film cuts to an establishing shot, it lingers for a second. It gives your brain a second to comprehend where we are cutting to. It allows the eyes to move across the screen to find what the place is and absorb the general vibe and aesthetic. Filmmakers will also cut on action so that the eyes will instantly move to where the movement on the screen is, and connect it with the movement of the frame before, making the edit seamless. Filmmakers and editors will also match where the audience's eyes will be on the screen throughout cuts. So if the focal point of the frame is in the middle of the frame, it will be easier to cut to another shot where the focal point is still in the middle. If the focal point is in the bottom left, and then you cut to a shot where the focal point is in the top right, it will take the audience a moment to reconfigure the entire frame. If this happens too often and too quickly, the brain can barely even process what is happening because it can't fully comprehend each frame before the next frame occurs. Lindsay Ellis made a phenomenal video series on the Transformers movies, and she brought up this point specifically with those movies. The action of the Transformers movies is so cluttered and fast-paced that there's no continuum of movement. Action is happening at blazing speeds, and there's an edit every half a second, but the focal point is never in the same place. So when watching a Transformers action scene, your brain basically just shuts off and understands the broad events happening, but not the specifics of each frame. All of this is to say that long shots don't have this problem. Having a long take allows the eyes to have ample time to move across the screen and fully absorb every detail. It makes the shot almost like a painting. You appreciate every part of it. You notice the small details in the background. And once you notice every surface aspect of the frame, you start noticing things that are even deeper. You think about how luscious the grass looks. You notice the texture of the character's skin. You become so drawn into the world that it's as if you can physically feel the texture of the frame, the smoothness of the rocks or the dewy plants. It's as if you can smell the fog and feel the cool breeze on you. But at this point, it no longer becomes about processing the actual information of the film. The long take has now gone beyond presenting information and has made you think deeper. As Tarkovsky passes the camera over some water with no dialogue or anything, you ask yourself what the point of this is. It's not presenting information, but the film becomes tactile. As the take continues, you become enamored by what it's depicting. You appreciate the beauty of the frame. It isn't necessarily saying something in particular, but you begin to appreciate its beauty. When you finish the movie and go outside, you begin to appreciate the, quote, long take that is experiencing life. If you watch Japanese movies, specifically Studio Ghibli movies, you may notice that at times, the plot of the film stops for a short scene just so you can appreciate a moment. In Howl's Moving Castle, there's a scene where Sophie and Markle stop to just sit by a lake. If you cut the scene from the movie, the plot would remain exactly the same. It doesn't add any new information, it doesn't progress the plot, it simply exists as a moment of reprieve. This type of scene is based on the Japanese concept of ma. which essentially means negative space or gap. Hayao Miyazaki, probably the most prominent Japanese animator and creator of Studio Ghibli, emphasizes Ma in his films. If you have non-stop action with no breathing space at all, it just becomes busyness. But if you take a moment, then the tension building in the film can grow into a wider dimension. Ma as a concept, whether intentional like in Spirited Away's train scene, or not explicitly Ma like in Stalker's, every scene, a moment of stillness, silence, and reprieve can add so much to the work of art. It gives the audience a breather to collect their emotions. It allows the audience to reflect on what has happened so far in the film, rather than continually beating the audience over the head with action until the audience blurs the entire film into an incoherent blob of action. And outside of a plot device, having a moment of calmness in the film can give the audience a chance to reflect on themselves. What are you thinking about during the stillness? Are you impatient about nothing happening? Why? If you were on the train with Chihiro in the film, would you be impatient or would you take a rest? Would you look out the window and appreciate the beauty of the water? When you're on a train in real life, will you be impatient or will you look out the window and appreciate the beauty of the world and take a moment of negative space for yourself? I think the use of Ma, or at least any moment of solace or silence in a film, brings out an important aspect of cinema that I believe many modern viewers overlook. Our modern interpretation of films are so centered around plot, but there is so much more to cinema than just plot. The visuals and the acting and the music and the soundscape all play an equal part in the feeling that the film elicits in us. Plot is just a piece of the puzzle. Sometimes you need a break from it just to feel the movie. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe as well. And also don't forget to check out the links in the description, like my TikTok and my Patreon.